All right then, folks, let's kickstart this evening with a brilliant session by the very distinguished and renowned speaker of tonight, Bhaskar Roy. Bhaskar is driving digital transformation for Fortune 500 clients across industry verticals, leveraging the combined power of AI and cloud. Through his career, Bhaskar has led several large-scale transformation programs, incubating new capability areas, starting new industry practice, and new geography development. He has also helped stabilize operations and expand the skill set industry coverage at a newly acquired center in Eastern Europe. Bhaskar is seen as an influencer and thought leader and holds patents in the areas of predictive analytics and optimization. A very warm welcome to you, Bhaskar. We are thrilled to have you here with us tonight. Handing the session over to you.
Thank you, Shama, and thank you to the Institute of Product Leadership for having me here today. And to everybody on the attendee list, looking forward to the next about 40 minutes in which I will try to talk through what I have picked up through my career as key drivers of leveraging data and AI for product development, right? And as we do that, before going there, a few places, right? When we think about AI, there is a lot of work that people are doing already. There is talk about how AI can help reduce complexity, how it can improve your go-to-market, how it can essentially drive a lot of product innovation. But what I'll do over the next 50 minutes is I will deconstruct some of these layers so that each of us goes back with a better understanding of how this is happening. But as we do that, there are a few important things to consider. First, of course, is the interplay. Even though we are thinking about the product, it has a huge interplay with how the customer interacts with that product and how each of those life cycles of the product and the customer play out together. And the key role that metrics play in all of this. To start off, a quick look, and I'm sure many of you are already familiar with this, the product life cycle. Development, introduction, the growth phase, the phase of maturity where you start seeing flagging of growth, and then eventually decline in what the product sales or the throughput is coming through. At the same time, we are also aware as consumers or customers ourselves about the life cycle that a customer goes through with a brand or a product that they are leveraging. It is first about reaching to that customer. How do you then acquire the customer, convert them to start using your products? You want to retain them on, and then eventually getting to a phase where you're trying to look at loyalty from that customer. But the interplay that I'll unfold in the next few slides is crucial as we think about all of this. So first, going deeper into product itself, the phase one, and I've tried to combine here a couple of different things that go on in the initial stages of any product that we are thinking about. First and foremost, where AI or data actually plays a huge part is the iterative development and design of any product. This iteration is crucial, more so in today's day and time, where the consumer or the customer time span or attention span for looking at a new product or offering is ever reducing. So how do you iterate through what you're doing? Essentially designing and developing your products much quicker than waiting to perfect what you have and then eventually go with that to the market. This plays out beautifully these days. If you think about more traditional industries, think about, for example, original manufacturers in the automotive domain. The frequency at which new cars or variants come out these days is significantly faster than it has ever been. It is that whole iterative nature of design and development, testing things out in the market, and then seeing how it kind of plays out. That's the first part, the iterative nature of development and design that's happening today. Second, at the beginning itself, you have to focus on the end user. So what kind of end user are you thinking about? What is your target segment? What is the kind of customer or consumer that you want to focus on? And then how do you test for all of this? Testing for different features that you're putting in, testing for user adaptability, user pickup, user adoption, and any of those elements is also a crucial part of the whole design and development process. Now, AI plays a crucial part here because it essentially enables you to start looking at different elements and features in isolation, as well as how they behave together in the end in the product, and how all of that comes together. So that's one crucial part that we need to think about. Designing and development, which needs to be iterative in nature, it needs to focus on the end user, and testing enabled by AI to essentially quicken the process of discovery and refinement of the product itself. So that's first. Second, once you've developed some sort of a product that you can start going to market, how do you then look at the market launch of the product itself, the product market fit, which needs to be guided by specific goals that you have in mind. These goals could be, for example, about the role that your product will play. Is it a path maker or a trailblazer in the market itself, or you have an existing product that you're now looking to take to a new geography completely? How do you create your complete marketing plan driven to essentially to get to awareness about that product with your consumers and customer base that you're looking to go after, to achieve that market fit for your product? Second, once you're in the market, how do you adapt to feedback that you're getting from customers and consumers on the ground? What are the improvement areas that the customers or consumers are talking about? Are there new features that the consumer base is telling you about that is crucial for you to look at how your product is being adopted in the market itself, and what can potentially drive higher adoption eventually? Third, once you're in the market, your product fit has been tested. How do you look at growth? What are the segments that you want to grow in? How do you want to expand your reach, your scale, your competitiveness, the penetration of the market, the development of a new market? How do you optimize for and accelerate growth through a very agile and iterative development process in that market itself? And the underlying theory here, again, many of you might be familiar with the Ansoff matrix, right? When you're looking at the products on one axis and the markets on the other, and the four different ways in which you can actually combine the product with the markets to understand how and where your products are going, right? And there are beautiful examples of how this has kind of played out with leveraging of the right plan, the right goal, and data along with AI to drive that forward for organizations. And some examples I'm going to cite here, of course, and this is a combination of being in a more traditional industry vis-a-vis the more digital industries as well. First, going on the traditional industry, talking about a company that many of us might have heard about already, the Dollar Shave Club, which was looking at essentially the razor blade market, which was dominated forever by brands like Gillette. And they thought about few key things that were missing in that whole journey from the product to the consumer, and figured out two things. One, the nature of selling was it had too many friction points, too many changing of hands that was there, and therefore came up with the plan of actually going direct to consumer. So I will manufacture, I will get to the consumer directly, cutting out all the middlemen, and while doing all of this, actually ensure much better customer experience than leading brands could give at that point of time. And through all of this, they cut prices sometimes, yes, but more often than not, they were actually able to maintain pricing, although slightly lower than traditional players, and start cutting at that market share. Now, this was achieved where it was the same product, but it was a new kind of market that they were developing, the direct to consumer market. Second example, more on the digital side, again, a traditional product started off with selling of books, took that online because you essentially removed the key constraints that typically exist in the physical world, which is your inventory and your shelf space, and redefined in that whole process the customer experience of buying books. But they didn't stop there. They actually looked at data and tried to, over time, get into newer areas. Newer departments were opened up, newer things were being sold to today, where Amazon almost sends everything. That was achieved, of course, over time, but by the use of data, incrementally that success was achieved. It was about trying something new, taking it to market, and then essentially rinsing and repeating that whole process every single time they introduced a new product. Third example that I'll quickly talk about is again digital. Facebook started small. So they built out essentially an MVP. And again, exact examples that I'm talking about are probably familiar. But the moment you start looking at it from the product lens of what exactly is it that those companies have done. So for example, Facebook, as I was saying, started off small within the Harvard campus only. That was a success. Took that to a familiar terrain next, essentially expanded from Harvard to all the other colleges, initially in the same area and then over time throughout the US. So essentially going into a tested market and expanding the scope of what they already had without putting too much into development of the product and building it out completely before they did all of that. So start small, expand into familiar areas, and then slowly over time increase growth when they had that successful base already built out, incrementally add new places where they were going, and features of course continue to develop, and the organization itself of course is evolving as they have kind of taken that whole journey with the brand and the customers that they are working with. So that was the third stage where we were essentially talking about market growth. And we saw examples of how, of course, different companies are doing, but the base of all of it is the data and the AI that is enabling them to do it at scale much quicker uh, and keeping the consumer or the customer at the center of what they're doing. The fourth stage of after that, of course, is maturity and retention. And this is where customer feedback actually plays a huge part in ensuring that you're listening to, you're seeing what the customers are talking about, you're looking at figuring out what kind of churn are you experiencing, how can I retain my customers, how can I drive better loyalty with my customers, and if needed, how does my product itself evolve over time, or is it time now to actually pivot and get into newer segments or areas. A great example here of companies that have been able to do this very successfully uh, is Apple, of course. They started off with personal computers and then over time realized that computing is actually going to go from personal computers to much smaller devices. That's when they went into the iPod and the phones, and then eventually created new segments that did not exist at that point of time, like the tablet. That was a classic case of actually pivoting the product strategy to continue engaging with your customers and leveraging that to create new markets that did not exist. And over time, of course, they have killed products that did not make sense. For example, classic example again of that is even though you will find sometimes an iPod being sold, but it's almost dead as a category because whatever an iPod could do is already there in all of our phones today, and that product has essentially been killed, even though it was very very popular when that decision potentially was made by the organization. So that's how we've kind of seen the whole product life cycle playing out, where we are looking at, and I'll do a quick look through again. First phase that we spoke about was design and development, where we are essentially talking about the iterative nature of development, how it is crucial, focusing on the end user, ensuring that you are building in your testing capabilities enabled by AI to actually drive better development of the product itself. Second, leveraging data to help you understand product market fit against the goals that you've set for the product, adapting to the market through feedback that you're collecting from the initial user set, understanding new features that might need to be developed, which might already be part of your plans for development or might be new features that you've not thought about. Third, looking at the growth, where you're looking at scaling and the competitiveness, going deeper into markets, developing new markets, optimizing and accelerating your growth through agile goal-based development that you're doing and incrementally going to market at each of these stages. And then finally, understanding from customer feedback throughout the process, how your customers are perceiving the product, how you need to then look at potentially churn management of customers who are using your products today but might not remain doing so tomorrow, and what you need to be doing to keep those customers with you, and also understanding when your product needs to evolve or pivot to become something entirely different to what you had in mind potentially initially, right? Now, all of this, as we've spoken through, the crucial parts there are the metrics that we have been listening about, right? Be it metrics that you need to consider when you are developing your product or testing the market fit, or looking at different ways in which the consumers and the customers are communicating with you. So these metrics are extremely crucial in that whole process of the product development itself. Now, getting the right KPIs or metrics that you are looking at is very, very crucial to be able to then measure them throughout this process that we've spoken about, and getting to a stage where we are looking at them very, very critically to understand not just how you're doing today, but also in the future, how you're going to look at development of specific aspects of your product. Second, as you look at each of these metrics or KPIs, there are different things that you need to be thinking about. One, of course, the frequency at which you want to track a metric. For example, if you're looking at your website and you're looking at only tracking your metrics, say every 6 hours on how your customers or consumers are interacting with your web page or the app that you might have rolled out, that might not always be the best frequency that you're looking at it. It might need potentially a quicker time span or turnaround between tracking of what's happening, and also building in different levels of AI to understand what are the metrics that might need your attention sooner than later, rather than you having to look through all of the reports or all of the metrics that might have been created for this purpose. Second, as you look at all of this, how do you understand which of these are the ones that need to be automated, and any manual effort taken away from that, so that you can focus on the key part that you are doing, which is developing and streamlining how your product looks, works, interacts with the consumer. And third, finally, as you think about metrics, is also the classic problem of whether you have enough data to actually make decisions basis those KPIs, or you have too much data and you actually need to sift through that to even understand what is it that you need to be looking at. A classic example of this is in today's day and time, almost every device that we have in our hands is filled with sensors. Now, these sensors are giving back information at regular intervals, but those abnormal things that might need to be looked at happen only once in a while. So how do you sift through that white noise of going from a situation where you probably had a dumb device in your hand, which was only working and functioning rather than actually transmitting data back, to a situation where you now have a deluge of data? How do you get that white noise out to start focusing on specific metrics, KPIs that need your attention, so that it essentially becomes a push metric for you? It is something that is pushed by the system to you that, okay, this is something, Mr. Product Manager, you need to look at today to actually drive your product forward, rather than you having to look through every single thing that's there and understand exactly what's happening. Second, and some of this you probably would have started realizing as we've gone through, is the whole product and customer interplay. Your measurements need to be at both those levels. First, of course, is measurement of product-centric features, understanding the usage, understanding the stickiness. For example, if it's a website or an app that is finally given to the consumer, or it's a device that is in the consumer's hand, how do you understand what is it in terms of features that the consumers are using? Is there any sort of friction in the whole consumer usage or interaction with that device or product? And then how do you leverage that to be able to understand the right way in which you probably need to tweak your product to get to a stage where you start understanding it from that customer's perspective, and also understanding the key underlying theme of anything that you're putting out there, which is, even though your product is very, very well made, it might be the top of the quality, but end of the day, the consumer or the customer always has an option. And it could actually be, it doesn't always have to be between your product or another product. It can actually be not taking any action and continuing to be in the state that the customer might be. So fighting that through the use of data to actually drive these things forward. And finally, a quick look at the customer journey stages that we had initially seen. And what I've tried to do here is putting it from the product perspective now, and try to see what exactly is it that the customers are looking at with respect to the product that they are interacting with, right? So first and foremost, as you think about the customer and the product interplay, identifying the right customers is crucial. It's important to drive that engagement. It's important to get that qualitative feedback. To then you get to the acquisition stage where you focus on customers that you want to have, right? Any service that you roll out today has, of course, the free version to start getting some sort of traction, or a freemium version that combines the paying and the free options, or potentially a completely premium service as well, right? So how do you focus on the customers that are actually driving your revenue, and maintaining that focus at the same time on sustaining that forward? It is not just about acquiring customers at any cost, and then those customers kind of go away when something different comes up. Third, how do you continue focus on customers to drive your business forward, and the kind of metrics that you need to be looking at to actually increase customer engagement through that whole process, and of course eventually monitoring customer churn to be able to understand exactly what we are doing, how we are doing things, what is the combination of this whole customer engagement with profitability, and then what is it that I'm hearing from customers which can help drive my product forward, either through iterations and developments that I'm going to do, or maybe a pivot that might be required, right? So that's a quick snapshot of things that I wanted to cover today, but I will reiterate a few things that we've kind of looked at. One, of course, looking at the product life cycle, the 4 stages that we spoke about of the development, of the market launch, the growth, and then finally focusing on maturity and retention of the product, how that interplays with the 4 stages that we see here of the customer life cycle as well, and the role that data and AI play in all of this to be able to drive this forward for all of us, right? And before I kind of finish, I'll take about another 10 minutes, and I'll walk through a few examples of how we've seen all of this playing out, of course, in the last few years, but more specifically in the last couple of years of COVID, right? And this is where data and AI actually have played a significant role in development of new products. So let's roll back a couple of years, and this was the time when COVID was raging all over, and there was no real antidote to the virus. There was no vaccine that could directly attack the virus itself, and this is where actually AI played a crucial role in development of the virus. And how does that play out? AI actually helped shorten the cycle taken for the development of the vaccine or the drug itself. How did that happen? A couple of things. One, as you think about any vaccine, it essentially is a combination of different proteins within its constituents that come together to then have the desired impact on the virus that it is trying to fight. Now, the combinations of these proteins that need to be tested out in a typical drug development cycle or a vaccine development cycle is millions of iteration. AI played a crucial role here in two ways. One, through AI, researchers and developers were actually able to reduce the overall set of consideration for the combinations of proteins that have a likelihood of success against a certain virus or antigen that it was trying to work with. So you are essentially reducing the overall universe of consideration and then reducing that many more iterations that were required. So that's one in which AI actually played a part by reducing that set. Second, as we look at this, the other part was the sheer computing power that was required to actually drive the results that were required from each of these iterations that was happening. Right. So combination of those two things: one, reducing the overall set of consideration that was there within the protein combinations. Second, driving through better computing and power in the whole process itself to reduce or shorten the time that it took for each of these. Right. So AI actually played a huge part in all of this. That's one. Second, if we take the same example and transpose that into the world of other products that might be there, one of course we spoke about was the drug development or the vaccine development industry. Second, if we transpose that out now, as you look at the traditional the time taken for any product development today, the total development time has been significantly coming down. It has been coming down because of one, of course, the availability of more data that can be collected to help inform decisions at each of the stages. And I'll quickly go back and pull up those 4 stages that I was talking about. I'll just leave that on the screen. At each of the stages that we see in the product life cycle, data is being collected to actually help inform decisioning. It is being done in an iterative manner. And a classic example, I'll go back to one of the traditional industries like automotive. And I'll take a quick example. This I was hearing from a dear friend of mine who works in automotive. Tata has been in the automobile industry for a number of years, specifically in passenger cars now for almost 30 years now. Maybe 94, 95 is when the Indica came out and the passenger car segment they entered. Over the last about 3 years, a crucial change that they have done in their whole process of product development is two, maybe 3 things I would say. One is infusing data at each stage of the product journey. How do I understand upfront from the customers or consumers who are going to be my buyers, what are they looking for in the features of the car? What is it that they are willing to pay for? What are the features that they hold dear to their heart and are minimum that they need within a car? Something that they failed with potentially when they had launched the Nano a few years ago. And through that whole process of driving data at each stage in the development, came the situation today where over the last about 4 to 5 years, they've launched a number of brands, and each of those brands have actually gone through iterative changes. And a classic example of that is the electronic vehicle category, where they initially came out with vehicles that were giving a range of about 300 odd kilometers, which was on par with what most international brands are doing. So that came out as a bare minimum that they wanted to go to market with. But then they have listened quickly to consumers and realized a crucial part that is actually hindering the adoption of electric vehicles in the country today, in India, for example. And that is the availability of charging points. People who are working, who are the ones who are actually able to afford electric vehicles today, typically end up staying a little further away from their hometowns. That distance to travel and the time that it takes is typically in the range of about 350 to 400 kilometers. So your standard out of the box electric vehicle does not fit that range. And therefore, even though you might have a very good product on hand, it is on par with what is internationally available today, is not going to fly off the shelf. And therefore, they have iterated, and they're at a stage today where they're going to soon start launching electric vehicles with bigger battery packs, which can actually go about 400, 420, 430 kilometers on one charge, and remove that friction in that customer journey to be able to do that. That's one classic way in which this is done. The other way, which again traditional industries like automotive have been doing this a lot, has been the whole customer buying journey online. And this has got accelerated in the last couple of years, of course, where earlier, if you think about it, it was the luxury segment typically, where you could do a lot of customization in the vehicle that you're buying. Now that customization in vehicle buying process itself has been transposed to other segments within that portfolio as well, where almost every big manufacturer today is actually offering online customization of the car buying itself. What color, what color can you do you want on your car? What is the exact feature set? Of course, with some constraints that have been laid out, what is it that you can customize and actually involve the customer in the whole buying journey process itself, where they don't need to physically go in. The only touch point probably is the car testing itself, where people want to test drive the car to see how it is kind of interacting before they start doing any of that buying itself, right? So that's a few examples of what and how things have changed around us, and actually data and AI are playing a crucial part in the whole product life cycle. The iterative development of the product itself, the introduction to the market, where continuous feedback from the customers plays a huge part. The growth, and we saw some examples that I spoke about, traditional industries like the razor market or the digital ones, where data and AI actually play a huge part in enabling growth for those organizations, and then eventually getting to a stage where the product is maturing. You need to understand how and where you need to iterate or pivot that product itself, or maybe it's good to potentially kill off a product and look at something new before that whole stage of decline starts kicking in its full force. So with that, I'll take a pause, and Shama would love to kind of take questions from the audience themselves.
Thank you, Bhaskar, for delivering a brilliant session. And as you can see, we already have so many questions lined up for you. So we'll take them. Just a quick reminder to the audience, you can post your questions on Zoom in the Q&A section, or any platform that you have joined. Post your question in the comment section. Alternatively, you can raise your hand and ask your question live to Bhaskar. Okay, while I say that, we already have two raised hands. Bhaskar, is it okay if I take them?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. Gaurav, go ahead and ask your question.
Hey, hi, Bhaskar. Thanks for that insightful session. See, from the beginning, I've always been aligned with the data-oriented approach as I worked in business data insights industry. But from last 3-4 years, I have been on the on the user side of product. I basically help my company implement the product. The challenge in that is, and that's where my question lies, that typically a digital product, right? It's going to be a mobile or it's going to be a website front. Can you recommend like a couple of softwares from the practical industry which helps me decide, let's say for A/B testing, basically, let's say if I have like I want to implement a feature, and if there are like 2-3 ways to go about it, I can just test it with some bunch of users and capture all the data, like how much time it took, whether they got confused, the drop-offs or something. Do you have some product recommendations in that segment?
I unfortunately typically stay away from product recommendations, but I can kind of talk to you a bit about how that should work. right? And I'll take a step back here, right? There are enough and more products from all the leading providers that are there, be it the Adobes of the world or the other providers in the market for that. Although testing is one part of that whole digital landscape, but everybody kind of offers a product that is there. But the crucial part, as you think about, is the iterative nature of that testing of any feature that you're doing. And the reason for that also is the volume of customers or consumers that are coming to your digital assets today, be it your web page or your app, is actually huge. So you don't really or you can't really afford to always be in a situation where you roll out one product and see how that works. You would typically want to have different versions of that, even to arrive at that one final version that you want to test against the in situ version that's there. That comparison is not very important, and therefore simultaneously you have to do multiple number of tests and then see iteratively how that works. What also helps again in the digital space is the duration of these tests doesn't need to be very long. Earlier, where you had to do a test in the physical world for a 30 or a 60-day period to even understand what is happening, you get that same reach today in digital in a 3 to 7 day period typically, is what I've seen. So that's one. Second, the reason why I typically stay away from recommending specific products is only digital is not important. There are other data points that you have about the customers or consumers or even your products and the interactions that consumers have with you, which play an equally important role. So it's combining all of that together and then understanding how those behaviors are playing together or interplaying with each other is the crucial determining factor, I would say, which most tools don't let you do. So there has to be some custom development that you end up doing to actually get to that stage as well.
Got it. Sure. Thanks. That helps.
Thank you, Gaurav, for that question. Moving on to the next one here. This question is from LG. In which phase of product development can AI ML be most useful and give the best yield?
So AI ML, I would say, LG is first of all, thank you for that question, because people do get enamored by the whole word of AI and machine learning and want to actually leverage it in every single place that they can think of. But that's not always the most prudent of strategies. You should start looking at AI or machine learning in very specific places where it has application. For example, a very beautiful place where most people overlook to actually leverage this is understanding what metrics should you focus on. I'll go back to the example that I gave earlier, where every single device around us today has sensors built in, and there is enough and more data there, and most of us will not know what to do with it, right? And therefore, you need an intelligent system that not only looks through all of that data, but then tells you which are the specific metrics that you need to be looking at, the metrics of interest, if I may call it so. And that is one place where the role that AI and machine learning can actually play is not optimal. It needs to be more and more. And then second, of course, the whole process of understanding the way consumers or customers are interacting with your product is also a place where AI and machine learning can actually help you build systems that are intelligent, that learn and actually drive more longer term impact on your product development and the way your product turns out.
I hope that answered your question, LG, and please feel free to post your comments and let us know. Taking this next question from Neha Hegde. How have recent developments in AI and the lag that arises between advancement and its application been impacting businesses? Did you hear me, Bhaskar?
Yeah, sorry, my network just was a little unstable. I'm reading that question that came in from Neha Hegde, right? So there is, of course, with any development, the ability to start implementing that in a commercial manner is something that does take time. And I'll make a slightly controversial comment here, right? As you think about the whole world of artificial intelligence, uh, probably there is no new technique or algorithm that has been uh, invented or innovated in the last almost 30, 35, maybe 40 years. These are all basic mathematical things that have existed since the 1950s, 60s, early 70s, potentially. What has actually changed in that time period is the ability to process the data to be able to implement those algorithms, right? And that is why, if you think of it, there are different ways in which algorithms are now getting commercialized and applied into day-to-day life. A classic example of this is the field of medicine. We, of course, I spoke about the example of how vaccine development and the process of leveraging data and AI to actually accelerate that process. There are other places in which the field of medicine actually is gaining from AI as well. For example, there are organizations today that specialize in leveraging deep learning techniques to sift through diagnostic data that is available with hospitals and reduce the total time that it takes to diagnose when something might be wrong. Now, this could be uh, for injuries or diseases that are long-term in nature. For example, there's a company called Cure.ai, which actually specializes in leveraging deep learning in the field of medical diagnostics to detect tuberculosis, right? And they are essentially automating that process of reading that chest or the CT scan and then understanding how and what needs to then be done to quickly start the process of medication. And disclaimer there, I actually work for a company called Fractal.ai, which owns Cure, but I thought it was a relevant example and therefore quoting it here. So that process is leveraging deep learning, which has been there for quite some time, but the use of deep learning to drive diagnostics is new. So from that way, it is actually impacting how that whole process works, which is slightly longer term in terms of how the disease itself matures and then eventually over time requires much more intensive care. But then it's also crucial in accident recovery. We might be in an accident, and the first hour after any accident is typically the golden. It's called the golden hour. It is the most crucial, when you need to understand if there is any internal bleeding. Is there any way that any other organs outside or inside of a body are actually within the harm's way, right? So a quick scan of the body, running algorithms on top of that, those scans, to understand where even the minutest of bleeds might be taking place to actually save the patient's life. So that's another way in which I wouldn't say impacting businesses, but impacting society is where actually AI is playing a huge part. Hopefully that answers the question here.
We'll take this next question from Lalita.
Mhm.
Can data lead to product failures? If so, what can be the reason for that?
Uh, it's an interesting question. Uh, so data, like anything else, can actually lead to a product failure. But if you do it the right way, it will lead to the failure sooner than later, and therefore give you an opportunity to actually course correct and get those get closer to that as close to perfect product as you could. That's what I would say. Essentially helping you detect the failure much earlier than otherwise.
Okay. There is a follow-up question, Bhaskar, to that.
Mhm.
It's what kind of data understanding helped Amazon expand into newer products?
Yeah. So first and foremost, of course, was as you think about products, as you start looking at, and this is a classic example that always gets cited whenever anybody is talking about analytics, and how it helps drive or understand customer behavior better. It's the market basket analysis. How do you understand what are the typical things that people buy together, right? And that is where some research initially was done, to start looking at the kind of things that people who buy books. So if I'm buying, say, autobiographies, or if I'm focused on automotive, or if I'm focused on adventure books, what are the kind of things that I would be buying if I am a reader who's focused on those kind of genres? So that typically is the starting point. You start creating associations between products, and then understanding the customer behavior better, to keep going from one product line to the other, and adding those on over time, to then get to a stage where of course they are now into everything. The other part also is the whole pricing equation, and data plays a very crucial part in that, of how and what is it that consumers or customers are interacting with, and how that can then influence my pricing decisions, to be able to price my products right, or even how I could potentially, for example, drive the right behavior from the customers. And some of these are things that have been there for quite some time, but get used in very innovative ways, right, online. For example, things on sale. There will always be anything that's put on sale. You will always have some wording around that product page, until when the sale is, till how long can you buy that product, so that you start creating that whole feeling of missing out on that product, or only so many units left. So these are the things that create artificial urgency. You typically see that happening very beautifully in the offline world, but the online world has caught on and actually gone much beyond. And all of this is being played out through data, because in the online world, your data possibilities are endless, and that generates more and more possibilities on what you can do with it. Some ethical, some maybe not, and that's a line that each business needs to draw for themselves.
Brilliantly answered, Bhaskar. Thank you for that. And I hope we have the time to take two more questions.
Yeah, please.
Okay. So this is on career guidance. Basically, this is from Shreyas. Uh, I'm a lead project manager with about 18 years of experience. Now I would like to see myself as a good data-driven product manager. How can I master this area of interest?
So one, of course, the Institute of Product Leadership, of course, has a lot of excellent courses that they run, and there are other places also that you should be able to access. There are enough and more MOOCs that are available today to get an understanding, I would say, of the product management world. Uh, and the one part that needs to be reinforced there is the whole data driven aspect, which is crucial, and that can also be done through. So I would say it essentially is a combination of learning from the content that's out there, using your experience as a project manager, because intuitively, as a project manager also, you leverage data in different ways. You are looking at, for example, historical instances of a kind of project either overrunning on time or materials or any of the other considerations that you bring into play. So you are intuitively doing a lot of that already, Srinivas, in your role today, I'm sure, as an excellent project manager. The angle that you need to bring in now is one, of course, of applying that data driven approach to product management, which you can learn from institutes like the Institute of Product Leadership and others that are out there. But second, more importantly, keep in mind that customer or the consumer angle, which I sometimes feel gets missed out. Because at the end of it, it is the consumer or the customer that's paying for that product that is being built out. It might be somebody internal if you're building a digital product for internal teams, or it could be an external customer out there in the market who always has an option of not buying your product or actually not doing anything at all with your product as well. So it's about what you have already as a project manager, combining that with technical knowledge that you can bring on board by learning more about product management and keeping the customer in mind. And as you combine all, see any hindrance in you becoming a very, very good data-driven product manager.
Absolutely, cannot agree with you. Cannot agree more with you, Bhaskar. And definitely, we have certification programs to help you out, audience. So please scan the QR code as you can see on the screen, and it will take you to a counselor that will help you out with your doubts. We'll take this one last question, Bhaskar. What are the 4 essential questions product managers should ask at every stage of the user-customer journey?
The first and foremost question in my mind, and that is most crucial, is who is the customer or the consumer of this product or feature, and why is it important to them? And as you start answering that question, subsequent questions start unfurling themselves. It's always a sequence of whys, WHY, that will lead to refinement of what exactly is it that you're building. So start with the consumer or the customer in mind, understand what is it that they need, and then move forward from there in an iterative manner to get to that perfect product.
Okay, perfect. So that concludes the Q&A part of the session. Now, coming to the exciting part here, Bhaskar, we'd like you to choose the champion of curiosity who has asked the best question, so we can reward them with a free digital learning course as promised. So you can check out the questions in the Q&A section. And as we speak, we have a few more questions coming up. But in view of the time constraints, we'll not be able to take them right away. But please allow me to forward them to you, Bhaskar, over email and get the doubts resolved.
Absolutely. So, I would say Neha's question was very, very pertinent.
Okay.
And something that we all should be thinking about.
Congratulations, Neha, on winning the free digital learning course. The Institute will get in touch with you shortly with the reward. We have enjoyed having you with us, Bhaskar. It's been a complete pleasure. Please accept this certificate of appreciation, a token of gesture from the Institute. The QR code on the certificate will take you to a dedicated Hall of Fame page that we have created for you that will hold the recording of the session. And we will also be uploading the recording on our YouTube channel. Please share it with your network. And thank you once again for sharing such great, brilliant insights, and hope to engage with you in the future as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sama. Thank you for having me today.
Thank you. Audience, before we close, here is a quick reminder on our next webinar that's going to happen on the 15th of March. Check out the link in the chat window to register for all our upcoming sessions. Thank you for joining in. It was great interacting with you all. With that note, I end tonight's session. Happy learning and stay skilled. Have a great night.